Emma's hands trembled as she stood before the towering iron gates of the Rosewood estate. The morning sun cast golden light across the pristine white mansion, its columns rising like ancient pillars toward the sky. She'd taken this cleaning job out of desperation, another anonymous position in another wealthy person's home. But as the gates slowly opened with a mechanical hum, an inexplicable chill ran down her spine. The cobblestone driveway curved through manicured gardens bursting with roses, red, white, and pink blooms that seemed to dance in the breeze. Emma clutched her cleaning supplies tighter, trying to shake the unsettling feeling that she'd been here before. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, greeted her at the entrance with a tight smile and a list of duties. "The estate has 42 rooms," she explained crisply. "You'll start with the east wing. The owner values discretion and perfection." As Emma stepped through the massive oak doors, the scent of jasmine and old wood filled her nostrils, triggering something deep in her memory that she couldn't quite grasp. The marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and overhead, a chandelier sparkled like captured starlight. Why did this place feel like coming home? She pushed the thought away and followed Mrs. Chen deeper into the mansion, her heart beating faster with each step, as if her body recognized what her mind had forgotten. The interior of the mansion was even more breathtaking than Emma had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their prisms casting rainbow patterns across cream-colored walls, adorned with expensive artwork. Persian rugs covered the floors in rich burgundies and golds, and antique furniture sat positioned perfectly in every room. Mrs. Chen rattled off instructions about cleaning products and schedules, but Emma barely heard her. She was too distracted by the strange familiarity washing over her in waves. As they walked through the grand foyer, Emma's eyes were drawn to a specific corner near the sweeping staircase. For a fleeting moment, she could almost see a small bicycle there, red with white streamers, but when she blinked, there was nothing but a decorative vase on a marble pedestal. "Are you listening?" Mrs. Chen's sharp voice cut through her reverie. Emma nodded quickly, apologizing. But as they continued the tour, she couldn't shake the feeling that she knew where each hallway led before they turned the corner. The layout of the house seemed to exist in her muscle memory, like a song she'd forgotten the words to but could still hum. When they passed a window overlooking the back gardens, Emma instinctively knew there would be a koi pond just beyond the hedges, even though she couldn't see it from this angle. How did she know that? "You seem distracted," Mrs. Chen observed coldly. "This job requires focus." Emma assured her it wouldn't be a problem, but inside, her mind was racing with questions she didn't yet know how to ask. On her third day, Emma was assigned to clean the library, a magnificent room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. The smell of aged paper and wood polish filled the air as morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating thousands of spines in gold and burgundy. She ran her feather duster along the shelves methodically, trying to focus on her work and ignore the persistent feeling of déjà vu. But when she reached the section near the fireplace, her hand froze. There, between two bookcases, was a wooden panel with an ornate carved rose pattern. Without thinking, without any conscious decision, Emma's fingers moved to the third rose from the bottom and pressed. A soft click echoed through the quiet library. Her heart pounded as a small, hidden compartment sprang open, revealing a dusty space behind the panel. Inside was nothing but cobwebs and a child's crayon, a blue one, worn down to a nub. Emma stumbled backward, her duster falling to the floor with a clatter. How had she known where to press? How had her hand moved so automatically, so confidently, to that exact spot? She stared at the blue crayon in her palm, and suddenly a flash of memory struck her. Small hands drawing on paper, hiding things in secret places, the thrill of having her own hiding spot that no one else knew about. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Chen's voice made Emma jump. She quickly closed the panel and stammered an excuse about checking for dust. But that night, Lying in her small apartment, Emma couldn't stop thinking about that blue crayon and the way her body had remembered what her mind had forgotten. The master bedroom was Emma's least favorite room to clean. Not because it was difficult, quite the opposite. The space was elegant but sparse, with a king-sized bed draped in silk sheets, a mahogany dresser, and large windows overlooking the gardens. What unnerved her was how comfortable she felt there. While dusting the windowsills and polishing the mirrors, Emma found herself humming without realizing it. The melody was an old lullaby, one her mother used to sing when she was very young. "Hush now, my darling, the stars shine above, keeping you safe in a blanket of love." The words came back to her effortlessly, though she hadn't thought of that song in years. As she hummed, she noticed something extraordinary. The acoustics of the room were perfect. Her voice seemed to resonate and amplify in just the right way, creating an almost ethereal echo that gave her chills. She hummed louder, experimenting, and tears suddenly pricked her eyes. She'd heard this exact sound before. She'd heard her mother's voice sound exactly like this in this exact room. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her cleaning forgotten, as fragments of memories began to surface. A woman with kind eyes singing softly. The feeling of being small and safe. This room bathed in different light, but somehow the same. This can't be possible, Emma whispered to herself. But deep down, something was awakening, a truth that had been buried for so long she'd convinced herself it never existed. She finished her cleaning in a daze, her mind spinning with questions. That evening, she called her mother but couldn't bring herself to ask what she needed to know. Not yet. Not until she was certain. The garden maze had become Emma's obsession. Other staff members complained about getting lost in its winding hedges, claiming it took them 20 minutes to navigate to the center fountain and back. Even Mrs. Chen carried a small map when she needed to check on the gardeners working inside. But when Emma entered the maze for the first time to clean the fountain, something remarkable happened. Her feet knew exactly where to go. She turned left at the first fork without hesitation, then right again, then left. Her body moved on autopilot, navigating the complex pattern of turns with absolute confidence. In less than 3 minutes, she stood before the marble fountain, its water sparkling in the afternoon sun. A stone cherub poured water from a vessel, and goldfish swam lazily in the pool below. Emma stared at her reflection in the water, her mind reeling. How had she done that? She tried to retrace her steps mentally, but couldn't remember consciously choosing any of the turns. It was as if her legs had simply known the way. On impulse, she decided to test herself. She closed her eyes and began walking back toward the entrance, trusting only her instincts. Left, right, straight, left, right. When she opened her eyes, she stood at the maze entrance, having navigated it perfectly. Impossible, she breathed. But it wasn't impossible. It was memory. Muscle memory so deep that 20 years hadn't erased it. That night, Emma lay awake, pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together in her mind. The library panel, the lullaby, the maze. Each discovery was a breadcrumb leading her toward a truth she both desperately wanted and deeply feared. The attic was Emma's assignment for the week. A dusty, forgotten space filled with covered furniture and boxes stacked haphazardly against sloped walls. Sunlight filtered through a small circular window, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. Most of the staff avoided this area, but Emma felt drawn to it. As she began sorting through old linens and organizing storage boxes, she discovered a small trunk pushed far back into a corner, hidden beneath a moth-eaten blanket. The lock was broken, and when Emma lifted the lid, her breath caught in her throat. Inside were children's toys, a wooden train set, a spinning top, a set of building blocks with faded letters. And there, nestled among them, was a stuffed rabbit with floppy ears and button eyes. One ear was missing, torn off at the seam. Emma's hands shook as she lifted the rabbit. Its fur was matted and gray with age, but she knew this toy. She knew it. "Mr. Floppy," she whispered. And suddenly she was 5 years old again, clutching this same rabbit during a thunderstorm, crying because she'd accidentally torn his ear. Her mother had promised to sew it back, but they'd had to leave so suddenly. Emma's vision blurred with tears. She pressed the rabbit to her chest, and memories came flooding back like a dam breaking. Running through these halls, playing in that garden maze, hiding crayons in the library. This was her home. This had been her home. The realization hit her like a physical blow, and she collapsed onto an old trunk, sobbing into the rabbit's dusty fur. How had she ended up here, cleaning the rooms she'd once played in, walking halls that had once echoed with her laughter? Emma's hands trembled as she pulled away dusty sheets covering old frames stacked against the attic wall. One by one, she revealed oil paintings and family photographs that someone had carefully stored away. Most were portraits of people she didn't recognize, previous owners perhaps. But then she uncovered a large family portrait that made her heart stop. The painting showed a young couple standing in front of the mansion's entrance, and between them, holding both their hands, was a little girl with dark curls and bright eyes. The girl wore a yellow dress with white flowers, and her smile was radiant. Emma staggered backward, nearly knocking over a lamp. She knew that dress. She'd worn that dress. She could remember how the fabric had felt, slightly scratchy at the collar, how she'd twirled to make the skirt spin out. And those people, her breath came in short gasps. Those were her parents. 20 years younger, their faces unlined by hardship, their eyes full of hope and happiness. Her father's arm around her mother's waist, her mother's hand resting on her shoulder. Emma traced the painted faces with shaking fingers. "What happened to us?" she whispered to the portrait. This painting had been made when her family had everything. This house, security, a future full of promise. How had they fallen so far? How had she ended up returning as a maid to the very home they'd lost? She carefully photographed the portrait with her phone, then continued searching through the attic with renewed purpose. There had to be more answers here. There had to be some clue about what had happened, why they'd lost everything, why her parents had never spoken of this place. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the attic floor, and Emma worked feverishly, desperate for truth. In the mansion's kitchen, Emma moved through her duties on autopilot, still reeling from the portrait discovery. The kitchen was massive, with industrial appliances, marble countertops, and custom cabinetry that reached to the high ceilings. The current owner rarely used it, preferring to eat out or have meals catered. As Emma wiped down the counters and organized the rarely used dishes, she found herself drawn to a specific lower cabinet near the breakfast nook. It was an odd little cupboard, smaller than the others, tucked beneath the counter in a space that seemed almost wasted. Her hand reached for the brass handle without conscious thought. Inside, the cabinet was empty except for some old shelf liner and shadows. But as Emma leaned in to clean it, her fingers brushed against something carved into the back panel. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, angling it into the tight space. There, scratched into the wood in a child's uneven letters, were initials: E. H. Age 6. Emma's maiden name was Harper. Emma Harper. She'd carved her initials here as a 6-year-old child. The evidence was literally written in wood. She sat back on her heels, her whole body shaking. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This wasn't déjà vu or imagination. This was proof. She'd lived here. This had been her family's home. She remembered now, this cabinet had been her special hiding spot, a place where she'd tuck away treasures and snacks, where she'd hide during games of hide-and-seek. She remembered her father laughing as he pretended not to find her. She remembered her mother bringing her cookies while she sat curled up inside. The memories came faster now, no longer fragmented but whole and real. Birthday parties in the dining room, Christmas mornings by the grand fireplace, running barefoot through the halls. This had been her world. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her small apartment bed, staring at the ceiling as her entire childhood reconstructed itself in her mind. She'd been 6 years old when they left. She remembered bits and pieces now, the crying, the shouting, the feeling of fear and confusion as her parents packed everything hurriedly. Her father's business had collapsed. There had been debts, so many debts. She remembered the word foreclosure being whispered in harsh tones when her parents thought she was asleep. The bank had taken the house. They'd lost everything practically overnight. The mansion, their savings, their entire way of life. Her parents had been devastated, humiliated. They'd moved to a tiny apartment across the city, and her father had taken whatever jobs he could find. Her mother had worked double shifts at a hospital. They'd scraped by, barely surviving, and somewhere along the way, they'd simply stopped talking about the mansion. It was too painful. They'd erased that chapter of their lives, and Emma, so young at the time, had eventually forgotten too. The memories had faded into vague dreams she'd convinced herself weren't real. But now, standing in that house again, everything had come rushing back. She understood now why her parents had moved to a different state when she was 8. They couldn't bear being in the same city as their lost dreams. Emma's phone glowed in the darkness. She had to call her mother. She had to know the whole truth. With shaking hands, she dialed the familiar number. It rang 3 times before her mother's sleepy voice answered. "Emma? Honey, it's late. Is everything okay?" Emma took a deep breath. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Did we ever live in a big house? A mansion on the east side of the city?" There was a long, painful silence on the other end of the line. When her mother finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, thick with emotion. "How did you... Emma, where are you?" Over the next hour, through tears and broken sentences, her mother confirmed everything. The Rosewood estate had been their family home. Emma's grandfather had built his fortune in real estate and left the mansion to her parents. But her father had made poor investments, trusted the wrong business partners, and when the economy crashed, they'd been over-leveraged and exposed. Within 6 months, everything was gone. "We tried to shield you from it," her mother explained, her voice cracking. "You were so young. After we lost the house, we just wanted to move forward, to forget. We thought it would be easier if we never spoke of it." Emma told her mother about the job, about how she'd ended up as a maid in their former home without even realizing it. The irony was almost too cruel to believe. The next morning, Emma requested a meeting with the mansion's owner, Mr. Davidson. She needed to understand how he'd come to own her family's home. He received her in the library, the very room where she'd discovered the hidden panel. Mr. Davidson was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, gesturing for her to sit. Emma's voice was steady despite her emotions. "I need to know about this house. How did you acquire it?" Something in her tone made him study her carefully. "I purchased it from the bank in 2005. It had been foreclosed on. The previous owners, I believe their name was Harper. Did you know them?" Emma met his eyes. "They were my parents. I'm Emma Harper. This was my childhood home." Mr. Davidson's expression shifted from surprise to something like compassion. He rose from his chair and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. "I had no idea," he said quietly, laying documents across the desk. "When I bought this property, I was told the family had already relocated." There was no contact information left. Emma leaned forward, scanning the papers. There were bank documents, foreclosure notices, and finally, the sale papers. Her parents' signatures were there at the bottom, her father's bold scrawl, her mother's more delicate script. Both dated February 2005, 20 years ago. "They lost everything," Emma said, her voice hollow. "My father's business collapsed, and they couldn't keep up with the mortgage. We moved to a tiny apartment. They never talked about this place again." Mr. Davidson nodded slowly. The housing crisis of that era destroyed many families. I'm sorry for what you went through. He paused, then continued. I want you to know, I've tried to honor this home. I've preserved it, maintained it. I know I can never replace what it meant to your family, but I've treated it with respect. Emma appreciated his words, but they didn't ease the ache in her chest. To be so close to her past yet unable to reclaim it was a unique kind of torture. Why did you buy it? She asked. For an investment? Partly, he admitted, but also because it reminded me of my childhood home. I lost my parents young, and this house, it felt like healing an old wound. They sat in silence for a moment, two people connected by the same walls, the same memories held in stone and wood. Finally, Emma asked the question that had been burning in her mind. May I see the basement? There's something I need to find. The basement stairs creaked under their weight as Emma led Mr. Davidson down into the lower levels of the mansion. She carried a flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows. The basement was exactly as she remembered. Exposed beams, stone walls, the old furnace humming in the corner. But Emma wasn't interested in the main area. She walked directly to the furnace, that massive metal beast that had frightened her as a child with its rumbling and heat. But it had also been her secret place. Behind the furnace, there was a gap between the machine and the wall, barely wide enough for a child to squeeze through. Emma knelt down, shining her light into that narrow space, and her heart leapt. There, tucked against the wall, were sheets of paper yellowed with age. She reached in carefully, her fingers just barely grasping the edges, and pulled them out. The papers were fragile, covered in crayon drawings, a house with 3 stick figures in front, a garden with flowers, a child riding a bicycle. Each drawing was signed Emma in wobbly letters. I used to hide here, Emma explained, her voice echoing in the basement. When I wanted to be alone or when I was upset, I'd draw pictures and hide them here. I'd completely forgotten. Mr. Davidson watched with understanding eyes as Emma sorted through her childhood artwork, tears streaming down her face. These drawings were time capsules, evidence of a little girl who'd been happy and safe and loved in this house. A girl who'd had no idea that everything was about to change. One drawing made Emma sob. It showed 3 figures holding hands, and above them, in her child's handwriting, were the words, "My family forever." Forever had lasted only 6 years. Emma held the drawings against her chest, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of everything she'd discovered. Mr. Davidson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Take your time, he said kindly. They climbed back up to the main floor, and Emma carefully placed her drawings on the kitchen table. Mr. Davidson made tea while she composed herself, and they sat together in the breakfast nook, the same spot where Emma's family had once shared meals. What will you do now? He asked. Emma shook her head. I don't know. Part of me wants to leave and never come back. It hurts too much to be here. But another part of me... She trailed off, looking around the kitchen with new eyes. Another part of me feels like I'm supposed to be here, like I've come full circle somehow. Mr. Davidson nodded thoughtfully. I have a proposition for you, if you're interested. I'm getting older, and I spend most of my time traveling. This house sits empty most of the year. What if, instead of just cleaning it, you became its caretaker? You'd live here, maintain it, preserve it. You'd have a salary and your own quarters. The house would be yours to care for, even if the deed isn't in your name. Emma stared at him, stunned. Why would you offer me that? Because I understand what it means to lose a home, he said simply, and because I can see how much this place still means to you. Maybe this is how your family's story with this house continues, not as owners, but as guardians. Emma's mind raced. The idea was overwhelming and tempting in equal measure. To live here again, to walk these halls every day, to rebuild her connection with this place. Could she handle it emotionally? Emma asked for time to think, and Mr. Davidson graciously agreed. That evening, she called her mother again and told her about Mr. Davidson's offer. "Oh, Emma," her mother breathed. "I don't know if that's healing or torture." "Maybe both," Emma admitted. "But I think I need to do this. I need to reconnect with this part of our history, for all of us." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Your father and I, we ran from that house. We were so ashamed of losing it, so hurt, that we just wanted to forget it ever existed. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we should have helped you process those memories instead of pretending they didn't exist." "It's not too late," Emma said. "Come visit me. When I move in, come see the house again. We can face it together." Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. "I'd like that. I'd really like that." The next day, Emma gave Mr. Davidson her answer. Yes. She spent the following week transitioning from maid to caretaker, moving her belongings into a beautiful suite on the second floor. Not the master bedroom, but a lovely space with windows overlooking the garden. As she unpacked, she placed her childhood drawings in frames and hung them on the walls. She put Mr. Floppy, the one-eared rabbit, on her dresser. She was reclaiming her history, piece by piece. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd returned to this house as a maid, one of the lowest positions, and now she was its guardian. Life had a strange way of coming full circle, and while she'd never own the Rosewood estate again, she realized that ownership was just a legal construct. This house was in her bones, in her memories, in every corner she'd explored as a child. 6 months later, Emma stood in the garden, pruning roses in the warm afternoon sun. The Rosewood estate had become her home again in ways that transcended ownership. She knew every creaking floorboard, every hidden nook, every way the light fell through the windows at different times of day. She'd made peace with the past, with the loss, the pain, and the unexpected journey that had brought her back. Her parents had visited 3 times, and each visit had brought healing. Her father had walked through the rooms with tears streaming down his face, apologizing over and over for losing their home. Emma had hugged him tight and told him what she'd learned. That home wasn't about walls and deeds, but about love and memory. Her mother had sung the lullaby in the master bedroom again, and they'd both cried at the beautiful acoustics they'd once taken for granted. Mr. Davidson had become a friend, visiting occasionally, and always treating Emma with respect and kindness. He'd even offered to leave her the house in his will, but Emma had declined. "I don't need to own it," she'd told him. "I just need to be here." As Emma finished with the roses, she walked into the mansion, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors. She paused in the grand foyer, looking up at the chandelier sparkling overhead. She'd cleaned this house as a maid, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves, never knowing she was caring for her own past. Now she tended it as a guardian, preserving memories and honoring what her family had built. The Rosewood estate would never be hers on paper, but it was hers in every way that mattered. She was home. Finally, impossibly, beautifully, she was home.